Okay, welcome everyone. If we haven't met already, my name is Andrew. I'm one of the hosts for this amazing conference this week. Thanks all for being here. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our sponsor for this event, Microserve, and Nigel Brown, who is the VP Professional and Managed Services for Microserve. So Nigel, I will turn it over to you.
All right, thanks very much, Andrew, and thank you all for attending. Excited to be here today. Hopefully, just a quick check. Everybody can see my screen okay? Thumbs up. That is
Yes, we can, Nigel.
perfect. Thank you. So with that, Andrew already introduced myself, but Evan, why don't I turn it over to you for a quick intro?
Hey, thanks. I'm Evan Zaleschuk. I am an architect at Microsoft, and I focus on Microsoft Teams, specifically the meetings and callings workloads. And I work with partners to help them help our customers, all of you, successfully deploy Teams and change the way you work.
Thanks, Evan. David?
Thanks for having me. I'm David Danto. I'm Poly's Director of UC Strategy and Research, and a lot of things going under that title, but the way to think about it is I try to be the connector between the actual needs of our users in the market and our product and planning people to make sure that we have a good connection. We've got a good closed loop feedback process so that we're building things and releasing things that work for everybody and meet all of the needs. Pleasure to meet everybody today.
Thanks, David. And over to you, last but not least, Dwayne.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Dwayne Robinson. My current role is Global Director of CyberClan. We're a cybersecurity firm, but before that, I was the Executive Director within the OCIO part of the provincial government. So I was responsible for a lot of our collaboration tools, and right in the thick of COVID when we all hit. So there's some good stories to share as part of that for sure. But thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Dwayne. So without any further ado, in terms of the agenda, really, I think if I just intro it a little bit first off, though, since the beginning of the pandemic, pretty much every organization has all been talking about remote work. So many of our IT teams, as Dwayne's alluding to there, really had to scramble to figure out how to get hardware in the hands of staff to work from home, so at least they could be partially up and running. Many of us scaled out remote access solutions, and in often many cases, Zoom subscriptions or GoToMeeting or who knows what got purchased really quick while they were trying to figure out how the heck to migrate to M365, because that sounded a little bit bigger and scarier, as I'm sure it has for many of you. Since then, a lot of what I see and talk to our clients about is really the focus shifting to stabilization, improving security, user experience, all that kind of dynamic. But more recently, I'd say that the shifting conversation really has come to the return to work and what that's going to look like. Now, if you're not already back, of course, and really a whole lot of talk around the concept of hybrid work. So today we're going to start by defining what hybrid work is, then talking about some of the challenges that this is going to bring about, as I'm sure many of you are already experiencing to some degree, and then from there, dive into the meat of it around solutions to some of those challenges. And at the end, try and save a little bit of time for Q&A. So without further ado, let's jump to the first really complicated question. What the heck is hybrid work? Maybe with this one, David, I'll turn it over to you for the first answer.
Well, I'm going to be brief, but I want to put a little perspective on this. If you think back, you see the term unified communication started in the 1990s. I used to talk about it being the only technology that was launching for 17, 18 years. We demonized people who worked remotely. I'm sure you remember IBM and Yahoo and some of the other organizations calling people back because of the lazy remote workers. And then we got into the situation with the pandemic where everybody was told they had to go home on a dime. We learned that our business continuity plans were all wrong because they were all go to the other site, and there was no other site. We all had to be home. And we learned a few things about remote working. We learned this technology works. We learned how important it is to have platforms and applications like Microsoft 365 and Teams to be able to collaborate. And we didn't hear about lazy workers. We heard about fatigue. We heard about people working too hard. So we've now learned that our office is us, whether we're on a mobile device or traveling. I don't want to tell you the journey I went through today to be here on this video conference with you. I was in a couple of different states and a few different airlines. The but my out of office message said I wasn't out of office, because I'm not out of office, because I can access Teams and I can do video calls. And as we get back to the point where offices are safe to go back to again, people will realize, I want to go to the office because I want to collaborate with my colleagues there and I want to brainstorm and hug. But today I'm going to be working on an RFP or a document. I don't need to travel an hour or a half hour to do that and come back. I'm going to do that from home. So that's where this concept of hybrid working comes in. We're now all going to up our games with the technology that we use at home, and it's going to be higher quality and better and a higher grade of what we do. And we now need to acknowledge the need for this meeting equality. Whether I'm in the office or I'm at home or I'm getting off an airplane and I'm joining a meeting, I want to make sure that everybody's experience is the same. We've all been in meetings, I'm sure, my last point, that where people in the room said, okay, everybody in the room be quiet. We need to let the people on the other end talk. And that's just not going to fly anymore. We need to create an equal experience for everybody participating, same view, same technology, same abilities, the ability to share from wherever you are. That's hybrid working.
Thanks, David. With that, why don't I turn it over to you, Dwayne?
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree with everything David just said. I'll add a couple of bits. It's been interesting, right? As I touch on the pandemic definitely fast tracked a lot of this space. There were some companies that were kind of dabbling in this beforehand, but now everybody's doing it. But it's more than just home or the office. They're trying to carry on with their day-to-day lives, but things are constrained a bit. So on any given day, I have somebody on my team working at the mechanic shop or up at their cabin or at the campground because they're on the vacation kid. So it has made that like so much easier. And I know my wife, they've shifted to desk sharing program, so she's at home one week and in the office one week. So I think it is different for each organization, but this is the new norm for sure, I believe, for a lot of organizations.
Thanks, Dwayne. Evan, over to you.
Yeah, I think my colleagues there have summed it up pretty well. The way that I look at hybrid work is having the ability to work from anywhere on any device and have the same functionality that I would have sitting in my home office, going into my work office, going into a customer's office, or anywhere, and really being able to have that flexibility, not only to work with my colleagues and be productive, but also work with people outside of my organization, whether it's citizens, whether it's some of the partners that I work with, so that everybody has an equal experience. I think we've been doing hybrid work for a long time. Myself, I haven't worked out of an office in probably 15 years. I've been a home-based employee for Microsoft, but that doesn't mean I don't go into the office and still want to have that same functionality that I do at my home. And I think that's what we really need to focus on is when it comes to hybrid work, does everybody have what they need to be productive on whatever device they're on and wherever they happen to be?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. I mean, really all of this is around collaboration to a good degree, obviously access to all the rest of the technology and the apps that you're at. But I absolutely agree with everything said there by you folks. Now, before we go a little bit further into the dialogue here, I wanted to start with a quick poll. So hopefully Andrew can help facilitate getting the poll running for you folks. First, really simple question. How much, of course, it's popping up on my screen too. Are 100% of your staff coming back to the office? Now, if it's not 100, you can just throw in your breakdown there. We'll see what the results are. Now, of course, I'm not sure how the results get displayed here, if you guys can see that yet.
I got him, Nigel. So far, about 30 response out of the group.
And while people are responding to that question, I'll point out just briefly, I've heard from a number of companies trying to adapt to this idea of hybrid working, and they've said things like, well, we're going to let people work from home 2 days a week and come into the office 3 days a week, or work from home 1 day a week and come in 4 days a week. I would propose, and I want everybody to kind of think about that, if we're putting structure and formulas around it, we've already lost sight of the reason for it. The idea is to let people do the work from the best place where they can do it, which may be their home office, it may be a client's office. They know what meetings they have and what's on their schedule. So it's this idea of flexibility that gets built in as well, not formulas. It's not a privilege. It's just the better way to work.
So we got the results. Nigel, can you see them, or you want me to call them out?
I think I got them here now. I just popped back up.
All right.
Yeah. So 14% of 37 respondents said yes, 100%. Another 14% said at least 19 or 90% or more will be in the office. Wow. So 40% or 38% of you said that greater than 50% of the office will be, and 35% said less than 50% will be in the office. So, I mean, this is screaming for the entire hybrid work conversation, in my opinion, for sure.
It's surprising that high.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dwayne.
Oh, I was saying, sorry, it surprised me the numbers are that high, to be honest, but.
Yeah, well, and you know, in some of my dialogue in the municipality space, one of the conversations I remember having was, well, if some of us, you know, especially in munis, there's a huge percentage of the workforce that have to be there. You know, if you're in the fire department, obviously you got to be the fire department, right? So I think it's a higher ratio than normal than private sector orgs. Yeah, so it's a different dynamic. And in some of that dialogue, I've heard, well, if they've got to be there, then the rest of our staff should be there. Or maybe the technology is a limiting factor, right? So if we jump to the next question there, hopefully, Andrew, you can help drive to the next question. Do you have a hybrid strategy? Is this something that you've been thinking about? We'll do this one a little quicker. Seeing some come in.
Interesting mix.
This is an interesting mix, yeah. Coming back. Yeah. So far, we're like 60-40, 60% yes, 40% no. Very cool. Yeah, still hovering up and down on that point. So it's, you know, clearly a topic that could be discussed more. You know, one of my worries has been hybrid work kind of got latched on by the marketing folks and everybody's going to town with it. Are we losing sight of the meaning behind it, right? And hopefully today that helps illustrate some of that dialogue. So why don't we go ahead and end the poll and keep moving into more exciting discussions here. So next up is around the challenges. So for those municipalities that are hoping to work or offer a more flexible work environment than ever before, where are the challenges that are likely to be raised, or what are we hearing from feedback in the broader community? With this one, Dwayne, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Nigel. Yeah, you touched on one of my notes, which was just sort of that element of fairness, if you will. Sometimes, although the firefighter comment was, I mean, obviously they never left; they had to stay in the office the whole time, right? And I know when I was at government, we definitely had a large portion of the team that were hands-on hardware, and they unfortunately never left the office when everybody else was gone. So. That is a challenge, is just that fairness off, especially in a you know, maybe heavy unionized environment as well. We had a hell of a time on the support side. You know, when everybody left, you know, people were borrowing the Wi-Fi from the neighbor in the condo across the hallway, but that guy's, you know, not at home that day, so she can't connect. Like, it was just the support side was definitely interesting. And then obviously I think it gets better on a daily basis, right? But there's just this general sort of compatibility issues that still crop up periodically. I know you're kicking tires on a brand new piece of hardware there. Very brave. Sometimes we deal with some of those. So those are kind of the top items off in my head.
Okay. Thanks, Dwayne. Evan?
Yeah, thanks. I think there's a few things that I consider, and number one across the board is the health and wellness of employees within your organizations. As we transition to this remote work, and I'm still guilty of it. How many hours a day am I putting in? Am I taking a lunch break? Am I taking a break during the middle or during the mornings and during the afternoons? Sometimes I wake up early and what do? I walk into my office. So I'm spending a lot more time online working than I probably would be if I was in an office. There's advantages to that because I don't have to commute. So I can be more productive. But on that same sense, am I overworking? And Microsoft has really accelerated the development of some of our products in order for us to be able to manage ourselves and understand how much time we're spending, and making sure, using some of the applications that we have, that artificial intelligence is helping us create gaps in our calendar or close those gaps so that we can have that as focus time just for the overall well-being of ourselves. And then we've even got applications now to help people with taking a break, whether it's a mental break, a meditation break. And I think that all becomes important. And depending on the organization, that data, some of that data can be rolled up into managers so that they understand, wow, Evan's spending too much time at work, or Evan's spending too much time on this project. And then how can they help me? The other thing that I'm quite passionate about is making sure users are equipped properly. Oftentimes, we don't consider how we look and sound to the people on the other side of that camera. How much are we doing to include them in the conversation so that it's an inclusive conversation, especially when we go back into the offices and there's people working from a meeting room? Maybe there's 4 or 5 people in that room. Are they considering the remote experience? So helping people understand the technology, as well as being empathetic to the people that are in another location. And then finally, I think it's being able to transition seamlessly from home office to a meeting room in your offices to whomever. And again, providing a similar or identical experience for employees, as well as those people that may not be an employee, like a citizen. So those are my 4 things that I really focus on, but health and well-being of employees is number 1.
Fair enough. Definitely agree with pretty much everything you said there, Evan. With that, turn it over to David.
Well, I certainly agree with what everybody said. The piece that I would want everybody to understand is how we kind of got to where we are and what it means. When this pandemic started, we sort of threw everybody in the deep end of the pool feet first all at once. So they grabbed whatever they had around, whether they were consumer earbuds or a tablet or whatever happened to be there, because it was stay home. You need to flatten the curve for a day, for 2 days, for a week, for 3 weeks, for a month. All right, this temporary thing we grabbed started to be challenging. It wasn't appropriate for what we need to do. Nigel, you're using a P15 right now. I'm using a P15 right now. I'm using lighting to make sure that I look good. I have a chair that's appropriate for me. Some of our people are commenting about, whether or not we're using ergonomic chairs. I've set up my home office here to be applicable and appropriate for me, down to the fact that, I wear eyeglasses. I've got the glare-free glasses so that you're not seeing the lights in the glasses. And the bigger part of this, not just from my perspective, but from the enterprise perspective and from some of your organizations, is that this is no longer this rogue thing where I say, oh, I need a headset, I need a camera, and you have to fund it and pay for it. This is now an enterprise grade device that can be managed by the enterprise. So this P15 can be inventoried. You know where it is. I haven't sold it on eBay. If it's got the latest firmware, if I have the bandwidth at home. So as you're managing these hybrid environments, you're no longer thinking about my video ecosystem, my collaboration ecosystem is my campus. It now goes beyond the campus to people's homes. It gets much bigger. And we certainly at Poly are giving you the tools with our Poly Lens and some of the other things we're working with to manage these ecosystems as they grow past the campus and onto this at home. So it's that progression that you're going to find challenging. Instead of just buying the cheapest thing you can to do it, to get some real good quality, appropriate for talking to colleagues and customers and clients and citizens, and appropriate for managing at an enterprise level.
Very well said, David. I think from my perspective, I think definitely the well-being side plays a big factor here. But one of the best comments I read recently was talking about sort of that unconscious bias against those employees that decide to stay home. So the rest all went back to work and they're hanging out beside Joe's cubicle over there, having a great chat about what they should work on that project. And poor Nigel is stuck at home, missing the entire freaking conversation. So as we go back, if not everybody's going back, how do you bridge that gap and make sure you've got spaces that are adapting for that? I worry about that, isolated employee experience where they're almost like that second class citizen. And I think definitely technology helps bridge that gap. But creating spaces and environments that, we need to change our behaviors in the workplace to accommodate for those that aren't there and think about it, not just go, yeah, poor Nigel totally missed that meeting today because it was impromptu. We just had a hallway chat, right? There's stuff like that we need to be more intentional about.
I just wanted to bring some attention, gentlemen. We had somebody in the audience raise their hand. If you do have a question, I believe it was Bill. If you do have a question, feel free to put it into the Q&A chat through Zoom here, and we will get that to the end.
And I'm monitoring the Q&A right now, so it's all good.
Perfect. Yeah, I think so. So while we wait for that one to come in, why don't we switch to more of the fun side of the conversation instead of all the stuff that's painful about it. So question number one, why, and maybe this is an overstatement for depending on some people think, but, why must Collab Tools be at the center of a hybrid work plan? With this one, why don't I turn the tables? David, do you want to go first this time?
I will, but I'm really going to echo what Evan said, because that's really the answer to this question is again, if you emailed me today as I was flying all around the country, you would have gotten a message from me with a blog of mine that says, I'm not out of my office, I am my office. I need to be able to collaborate on a document, even if I'm using an airplane's Wi-Fi, even if I'm working from home, even if I'm at a client's office. So, you need a platform. You need a suite of solutions that enable instant messaging and chat and persistent chat and voice communication and video communication and document sharing and collaboration. That's how you can do it. I'll be perfectly honest with everybody, I was a big skeptic of team chat, team collaboration when it came out, with the original, Cisco Spark and then Microsoft Teams. And I was thinking all these things were, solutions looking for a problem. And oh boy, didn't we give them the problem? This idea that we were now going to be all dispersed all over the place, but needed to collaborate equally. I don't think you could manage in the pandemic effectively without these types of suites. And it certainly accelerated, to use Mr. Nadella's terminology. We had years of digital transformation in months. And most organizations that were reluctant to be on the cloud finally gave in and went onto the cloud. Not all, but many. And I think the idea to be able to collaborate on platforms enables this hybrid working, enables you to work from wherever you are. Because again, I could take out my smartphone today on an airplane and edit an Excel document for a live event that we're doing on Monday, because I had access to it on the system. And that's irreplaceable. You couldn't do it any other way.
Yeah, so it sounds like, David, really what you're saying, it's more than just, hey, we got a meeting tool. It's not just, hey, I set up my meeting in that 1 hour and we all collaborated looking at a screen share of a document. Really what you're talking about is the ecosystem around that.
Exactly. And again, I don't want to take Evan's speech away from him, but that's really this concept of making sure that everybody's got the right tool for the project, whether that's software, hardware, or a combination, is the only way that you can make effective hybrid collaboration work. Because if you see me as working from home, and this has been my home office here in my basement in New Jersey, this has been my home office for almost 2 decades at this point. If you see me as some sort of privilege that I don't pull my fair share and I don't do my work, it's not going to be good for the organization. You have to see my output and my contributions equal to those of anybody who's in the office all the time. I'm not operating a jackhammer or a barista or the fire department, but in terms of knowledge workers, I need to be able to contribute equally, and picking the right tools let me.
Fair enough. Well, that sounds like a perfect lead in for Evan.
Thanks. And to add to that, the story that I like to tell people is, look, I'm not really that smart, but with my colleagues, collaborating with them, we collectively become a lot smarter. I'm living in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia. I'm 3-4 hours away from the closest Microsoft office because we have this flexibility of work. So when we start doing brainstorming sessions, if we just have audio and video, that's only so effective. But if we can bring up a shared whiteboard experience and everybody contribute to that whiteboard, now all of a sudden our productivity goes through the roof, and it's great because that whiteboard is accessible to everybody after our session. And even if people miss that session, they still have the ability to look at it after the fact. Not only that is we've recorded the session so they can listen to what we were talking about. We can turn on transcription so that everything that has been said by every individual is transcribed real time. And I'll even use things like the ability to turn on closed captioning if I'm in a noisy environment because I'm mobile, and feel more included in that conversation because I'm not missing anything. That's all possible through collaboration and collaboration tools. And as David mentioned, opening up an Excel spreadsheet and modifying it while you're on your mobile device, but also having other people in that same Excel spreadsheet, modifying it all at the same time. You're seeing all those changes occur, and you're all talking about it at the same time. So that co-authoring ability is just the tip of the iceberg, but there's so many more things that we can do. And that's why collaboration has to be the center of all this hybrid work. I have experts all over the country and colleagues in other parts of the world that I communicate with and collaborate with. That's given me abilities that I didn't have a number of years ago.
Great. Thanks, Evan. My perspective is certainly, quite frankly, and I had this chat literally 2 weeks ago with Spud, our president, for those of you know him. Kind of the line that if I recall, we were maybe a couple drinks into the conversation, but was like, Teams essentially kind of saved our business in our viewpoint. That's how we collaborated so fast. And thank God we were ahead of that curve, in terms of readying for it. We'd already done our Exchange migration. We had done a SharePoint Online migration. Teams was there. We happened to be piloting voice at the time already into Teams. So we accelerated that, cut over 300 phones and went fully voice native in Teams as well, right? So for us, it was honestly that saving grace for sure. And the ability for us to keep that sense of a team. We always thought our whole culture in the office place was because we had an in-person culture. Well, suddenly we actually have figured out in the last year, no, it's still there. It's probably stronger than it ever was, right? So, if we hadn't had that collab platform, we would have been screwed, quite frankly. No. Okay, over to you, Dwayne.
Before, just a real quick comment from me on something that you said, Nigel, I think is actually very important. We learned a lot of things during the pandemic. But one thing that we learned is our whole approach to rolling out technology was wrong. We used to do a proof of concept and then, a part one rollout and then a part two rollout and a part three rollout. We'd be months into the project before we had it rolled over. And when the pandemic hit, we essentially, as I said, threw everybody into the deep end of the pool all at once. And technology manager after technology manager tells me that there were no more difficulties than they had over a month-long rollout. So I think once we get past this going forward, we're going to learn that we're going to do some big splash cutovers going forward because the pain isn't any worse and the benefit comes faster. Very interesting lesson that we learned through this. I'm glad you mentioned it.
That is a good point, because honestly, if there's any advice I had to give to all the munis out there, like my view is we still have to move faster. I've had too many conversations. Well, we're figuring out Azure AD and we're just starting our Exchange Online migration. We got to get past that. In my opinion, to accelerate, get beyond that. Exactly what you're talking about, David. You're not going to look back as you do, and there's so much more value to it, especially as it comes to the hybrid work model. Sorry, Dwayne, I'm totally stealing your thunder here.
No, and I'm nodding away, agreeing with everything. So I'll add a couple of real world experiences from when I was with BC government and stuff, right? And it's exactly what everybody's talked about. And trust me, we were the epitome of, everybody used to go into an office. The max we would really have working from home on any given snow day was maybe a few thousand people, right? And then in a week, we went from a few thousand, maybe 5,000 max to 35,000 in a week, right? And it was bumpy. We took our Skype to Teams migration. That was a 2-year plan, David, and it was a month, which was crazy by, government standards. But it went pretty smooth, right? And I was the first guy, I loved my whiteboards. I had 4 in my office, right? People and stuff was out of place. And there's when we talk about the tools, some tools are better than others for sure. They're not all the same. We're on a Zoom session now, and we talk about Teams. Are probably two of the front runners, probably the two top in my opinion. But once we got through that sort of first month, it opened up the avenue for we started doing virtual cabinet sessions and virtual parole hearings, and like everything was now sort of piggybacking off this tool set that we just put in, and it's opened up so many more opportunities and stuff. So yeah, they're key for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Dwayne. So let's go to the next question. So that's really good chat around the tools and the collab, sort of the foundational elements. So then we come to the physical office, and now there's going to be people starting to show up there. Alberta, maybe a little bit longer than we thought. I was talking to a few of our clients that were gangbusters ready to start in September, and now we don't know. So it's been delayed for sure. But as hybrid does come back and more people return to the office, what does that mean to the physical office space in terms of collab and what we've got to do there? With that, why don't, Evan, I give you the floor first?
Yeah, thanks. I've already mentioned the idea of we're moving from being remote workers and going back into the office, at least some of us, going into meeting rooms. First thing is, how are those meeting rooms equipped? Have you reimagined the use of those meeting rooms? So are they just simple audio and video, or can they actually do collaboration? If you reimagine those meeting rooms, are you talking to the people that are actually using them, or is it just simply IT putting some technology in without talking to the people that need to use it? And then working with a partner like Microserve, I think it's really important to know what's coming next, or what's coming very soon. So for example, some people may feel somewhat uncomfortable going back into an office environment, social distancing requirements in a meeting room. Maybe that meeting room, based on the size, is only allowed to have 5 people in it. What happens when the 6th person walks in? Well, using technology from Poly and Microsoft, we'll be able to identify how many people are in that room. So if you set the limit, the capacity of that room to 5 people, Poly and Microsoft Teams will say, wait a minute, a 6th person just walked into that room, and notify those people so that someone can excuse themselves. So there's a lot of this capability that's coming or is here today that you need to be aware about as you reimagine these meeting rooms from being simple whiteboard with a camera and a speaker and a microphone to a collaboration experience, to considering the health and well-being and the comfort level of all the people that will be going into the office. So reimagine that office space that you have now, and that you're going to need in the future.
Okay, thanks, Evan. Dwayne?
Yeah, I'll put a little different spin on the office as well. I agree with everything that Evan just said. In a past life, when we were sort of starting to roll out some video conferencing collaboration type tool sets and stuff, we initially started as a means to cut back on some of the air travel that we were doing, right? But we quickly determined, like, the stuff works, it's a good success. And we started to downsize some of our corporate office space. And it saved a ton of money in real estate costs, to be honest. Like, it probably next to labor was the second biggest line item on the P&L. And we're starting to see, like, LinkedIn is littered with other stories and stuff of organizations, they're just giving up office space because they don't need as much, right? They'll probably keep some, right? And like I say, my wife's company is doing the shared desk thing, and that's probably going to be fairly common, drop-in locations. And but yeah, there's some good money to be saved by organizations by kind of adopting this platform for sure.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Dwayne. Over to you, David.
Yeah, I'll just add to those excellent points a couple of things to be aware of. I want to help everybody get a new definition of the concept of new technology, and understand what some of the technology does. We used to plan floor plans for having some number of conference-capable rooms, but only a few of them would have the high tech. Most of them would just have a speakerphone in it. And we can't really do that anymore, because now that we're in a hybrid future, there's going to be a lot more people, meetings that have at least 1 or 2 people remote. So we need to put technology in all the rooms. The good news is that the technology to support collaboration in rooms is less expensive now than it was back then. It's easier to put in. And this concept of new, even if you put in a room 3 years ago or 2 years ago, the items that are hitting the market right now, certainly the poly items and others as well, are just miles beyond, what we have now in terms of machine learning and AI support. Takes all of the menial tasks out of collaboration and lets you focus on the actual work. For example, the cameras that we're using right now, and I don't know if you have yours set up this way, Nigel, the one I have set up, even though this is our home camera, these are solid state, 4K, high quality cameras that we can stand up and walk around and it'll track us in real time. So no more panning. And I have to have it set that way. And I don't know if you have. And I know I keep mine off because I don't want it to be, but I could go over and play with Underdog back there and it would look like I was on a whiteboard. There you go. See?
There you go. I saw mine come in. Yeah.
So no more looking for a touch panel in a room. No more need to be able to adjust back and forth. Also, we used to have something called noise block, which was essentially an audio gate for those of you that understand technology, which is somebody was typing or crinkling or something, it would close the audio. But then if they started talking again, it would open the gate back up and you'd hear all of that noise. Well, built into the Poly products and in some of the cloud offerings from Microsoft as well, you have noise block AI. You have AI technologies that will hear these noises. They know it's not speech and filter it out. So it's no longer a gate. You'll just hear what you're supposed to hear. And it creates, if you think about it, a better than being there experience. If I'm in the room with you chewing on your sandwich, I have to listen to that or the siren going by. But if I'm on the remote end, I'm getting it filtered. I'm getting it without an issue. So, smarter cameras, smarter audio, smarter capabilities, less menial tasks to start meetings, to get into meetings. It's just the technology that's out there now, again, is less expensive and higher quality, and you're going to need it in almost every room. So, and you're going to need a lot more collaboration rooms because honestly, in a hybrid working environment, that's what people are going to come to the office for. They're not going to come to the office to sit at a desk. They can do that at home. They're going to come to the office when they want to be with 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 colleagues, whiteboarding and planning and strategizing and celebrating. So you need more conference rooms, less offices, as Dwayne said, but more conference rooms in them. So it's definitely going to be an interesting future.
And just to add, David, just about almost perfectly on cue, while you were talking about the acoustic fence, my doorbell rang and my dog went crazy. And I'm pretty sure there wasn't anybody on this call that heard that happen, but I did. It was distracting a little bit for me, but hopefully it wasn't distracting for everybody else. That's the difference.
Yeah, and we have a ton of, and please reach out to the Microserve team and to your Poly representatives to understand about the research that we can give you around personas. Who's appropriate to be wearing what type of headset versus a hands-free device like we're using now. There's a ton of research that you can apply to your own organizations free, to figure some of this stuff out. But yes, I prefer using a hands-free device down here, unless there's a gardener going or somebody's doing work around the house, in which case, I'll put on like my Voyager Focus or something else. I have the ability to have like 100 headsets near me. You have to pick the right ones for the people in your organization. Give them choice. Don't say this is the headset that you can get, because that doesn't acknowledge the fact that there are different personas and different use cases. And some people don't want to mess with their hair. They want to have it in their ear or around their neck or on one ear. So make sure that there's choice involved when you set that up for your organization.
Agreed. No, that's a really good point, David. I am really excited to try. I just got this P15 last night. So as I think Sil mentioned, maybe a little brave to try and run the first meeting on it today, live with all of you folks. But the one I'm excited about is the whole sound fencing idea, right? Is I share an office in our basement where I am right now with my wife, who literally is just in front of me. And our biggest problem over the past 2 years has basically been we're in meetings all day at the same time. So the whole idea is she could be right there and her voice isn't carrying into all my meetings like it has in the past. That's stuff I'm, super excited to see. But I really did want to touch on, David, to reemphasize your point on the need for more collab spaces. Like, honestly, that's the biggest area when I think physical office environment. We do need to rethink the physical space. Like, and I think of so many municipalities, like in the IT areas that I've worked in or spent time in, it's the cubicle areas and open spaces, right? That works again for the colleagues that are there. As soon as Nigel, you got to dial in to that conversation. Can you put a speakerphone in the middle of that open area? Well, no, because now you're bugging the help desk that's down the hall. It doesn't work that way, right? So I think it's not just about having more meeting rooms, where we all think, big bucks, big fancy boardroom setups. We need to create more small spaces, those huddle rooms, those collab spaces, whatever catchphrase you want to, tie to that. But I think that's so important to give more, that ability to walk in to a space quickly. Oh yeah, well, we need to pull in Nigel who's at home today. Let's run into a huddle room. We didn't book it because they're not even bookable resources, but we'll one touch join you or plug my laptop in and connect to the right gear in the room and have a conversation with video, with sharing a whiteboard maybe, right? So I think that stuff is super important.
About the financial services, history and background, and there's $50,000, $60,000 video conference rooms with multi-components all over the place and signal processors, and for a couple of $1,000s, you can put an awesome MTR system in. You can put a terrific poly system in. That's miles better than what those other expensive rooms used to be. And yes, there's some more gear, and you can do some fancy things, and you can build boardrooms any way you want. So that's not going away. But the prices have dropped. The quality is improved. The idea of putting them everywhere isn't a break the bank thing anymore.
Yeah, very true, for sure. Now, with that, I'm just a little cognizant of time, and maybe this is slightly redundant with that last question, but third one being, how do we support the employees' transition to hybrid work, and what do we have to do there? With that, Dwayne, why don't I start with you?
Sure. Yeah, I guess a couple things. I'll be short in the essence of time. We do need to be mindful. I guess there's probably some generational type, mindsets and stuff as well, right? Like, if you're got a 20-something sort of workforce, they're going to be a little bit more adaptive to some of the technology and stuff versus if you got, an organization that's, closer to retirement, right? So that does play a factor in it. I won't get into details and stuff, but that does play a factor. I know we're remote, the organization I work for now, the things that we get reimbursed for our internet coverage and stuff, because that is a component, and it, better bandwidth does help and all these sort of things, let's be honest. And people are scattered everywhere, right? So we've got a bunch of people, trialing out the Starlink, for example, right? So there's some stuff. And then I touched on the support component earlier as well. No longer can the IT guy, walk down the hallway and, share shoulders with Bob and fix his computer and stuff as well, right? So, you're tracking the guy down, you're doing a remote session. Hopefully you can connect because there's not some issues. So there's a support component for those people that we just need to be careful of.
Very true. Evan, your thoughts?
Yeah, and just to add to what Dwayne was saying, I was a Microsoft partner for nearly 25 years before I came to Microsoft, and did a lot of consulting work with organizations in all sorts of different industry verticals from all over the world. And I think it comes down to the culture of the organization. And that culture will then define two things. One is, how do you enable those people? How do you help them learn? Lunch and learns are appropriate for some. Maybe short video clips are appropriate for others. Maybe having desk side support. It all really depends on that culture of the organization and how those people need to learn. Kind of to Dwayne's point, different age groups, different generations of people will learn differently. But also that comfort level of those employees. Like, are you comfortable going into an office with a group of people? Are you comfortable staying at home? Are you comfortable doing a little bit of both? And then what can we do to make sure we're addressing not just the employees learning and as the products evolve, but also making sure that they're comfortable in your meeting rooms, in your offices, or wherever they happen to be. So to me, it's really dependent on the culture. Same industry vertical doesn't necessarily mean the culture is the same between two identical organizations.
Thanks, Evan. And David, if we can keep this one brief, so I know apparently we've got at least 5 questions Q&A and one more here to touch on.
I think Evan and Dwayne covered this really well. The only thing that I'll suggest, and I want everybody to be aware of, is the other side of this. It's not the employee, but it's the supervisor. What used to pass for supervisory skills isn't going to make it anymore. To supervise a remote team requires specialized skills. And if you have supervisors that now have new remote employees, you need to provide some of that training for them. It's not new. I've managed 24/7 shifts. I've managed global teams. The ability to do that is fine, but it's no longer the management by walking around. That MBWA, that, seeing people at their desk knowing they're working. It's kind of management by calling around. And you really need to have a lot of ability to reach out and extract some of the stuff like a dentist. So it's a real project. You have to really understand what's going on with it. I would definitely ask people to focus on who their supervisors are and make sure that they're trained to deal with the remote staff.
That's a really good point, David. And you're touching on the one comment I was going to add, which is, really thinking about redefining our team's expectations. If you're a leader in your organization to any degree, we got to reset what it means to communicate. What's our preferred communication channel? It shouldn't be the over the shoulder yell in the room to who's ever there, because the poor people at home have no idea. We do need to change the way we communicate and those expectations and make sure it's loud and clear. It ain't just all about the technology, even though I'd love to think it is. But, that is
Like I
really
said, all of those skills exist. They've been used for years and years and years. Now we just have to do a better job disseminating them out through the supervisory staff.
Absolutely. And with that, final quick question here is, what tools and specifically more the IT capabilities are needed to transition smoothly? With that one, David, why don't I give you the floor to start on this one?
Just go to poly.com and look at everything that we make. And you won't be, you get a good platform like Microsoft Teams and you get the Poly gear, and there's nothing you can't do. We tell everybody that, we're not going to make you a superhero, but we'll provide the cape.
Fair enough. Evan?
I think one of the things is being able to empower your IT department and those support people to be able to work remotely as well and not have to be in an office. And from a Microsoft perspective, we have access on mobile devices to do all your administrative tasks from anywhere you happen to be. We can implement multiple levels of security, but also being able to administer your environment through a single interface. And I think that's key, not having to switch between multiple interfaces that add complexity, having multiple support agreements, trying to unify everything for that experience for those IT support people and give them that flexibility, the same flexibility you're going to give employees to be able to work from anywhere, same capabilities for IT.
Yeah, I know, Evan, I'd expand on that. In my head, I've said it to my team, whether they like it or not. But, a part of my role is running a managed services group that we got a help desk that answers calls every day.
Yeah.
It's not just about fixing problems anymore. You are the change enablers for our end users that are struggling to figure out how the heck to post in Teams or Zoom or whatever the tools we're using, right? So we got to be our own experts, but then we have to be the ones sharing and getting excited about it and showing people what to do. I have my favorite bookmark is always the Quick Help link, which is our training platform we use for this stuff, to the how to share content through OneDrive. The day I've transformed our VP Finance, who, can barely find his computer in his office full of paper, right? And he started sharing links out and modifying a shared spreadsheet as opposed to compiling 10 from all of us leaders, right? All that kind of stuff really does change the game if we think differently, right? Dwayne, over to you.
Sure, thanks. I don't work for a vendor that I can shamelessly plug, but I'll touch on a couple other things here. Obviously, if we're talking bouncing around like the true hybrid, you got to get out of the desktop game, right? So you're transitioning to laptops if you haven't already. So there's a component there. If you liked your old handset phone, well, you got to transition away from that because now you're probably using a soft phone of some sort. I know when I was at government and everybody went, I saw some crazy pictures of people with a desk on their chair to simulate that stand-up desk that they have back in the office, right? Even a bunch of people even took their ergonomic chairs because they didn't have that at home, right? So there's a whole other component in and around just the collaboration tools and the fancy headsets and stuff for sure. But put it all together and I think it can work, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Dwayne. And I think with that, that's a perfect lead in. We got about 10 minutes left here. Let's turn it over to some of the Q&A. And I think
all right. I'm here, Nigel. I'm here,
awesome.
Nigel.
Thank you.
I think we've touched some of that consideration, but anybody on the panel here would have a perspective on ergonomics. How do we support employees relative to the ergonomy of the work at home and the work in the office, given this hybrid work environment we're in?
Who wants to go first?
The question was around ergonomics of your,
yeah, providing the right chairs at home and the right desk and all that kind of stuff. Is there any best practices or guidance that we could give the municipality entities around that?
Yeah, and I used to work with Herman Miller. Some of you might be familiar with them. Facilities, they make desks and chairs and office. Same with Steelcase, Knoll, others. And they've been really focused on the ergonomics and then the health and well-being of the individuals sitting at those tables. So for example, a lot of them are IoT enabled, where if configured effectively, a sit-stand desk will vibrate just before it raises up to notify that individual, you've been sitting for too long, you need to stand up. Or the ergonomic chairs that they have, there's IoT sensors in there you've been sitting for too long. So I think we're getting there where we're going to be able to see the integration of vendors like that with Poly, with Microsoft to help you be able to do more.
Wow, this is exciting.
And an interesting one there, maybe I'll steal from where your response would go, David. But, again, I just got this Poly device to play with before this session, but I pull up the Poly app and what's one of the pages on it? But it is ergonomics. It's telling you should have, your screen at this eye height, your keyboard, your arms should be like this, your knees need to be 90 degrees. That was my early days in the pandemic as well. I mean, I've always worked a lot from home as well, but not to the best posture and extending it to every single day. That was my problem, right? My physio guy was saying, I'm seeing so many hip problems and all these injuries. You got to stand every 15 minutes, So some of that, whatever we can do to encourage our staff, like you need to be moving. Why don't you take a call outside and walk around to stretch your legs?
Yeah.
We sit way too much, right?
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
That PolyLens app is definitely something that gives you a lot of that. I'll only mention that at more of a 30,000 foot level, that we've seen facilities departments and technology departments combine over the years, so that room builds and technology builds kind of go hand in hand. We're starting to see HR departments get mixed into that mix as well, because it's not just, is it the right room with the right size, with the right technology, but is it the right experience? And is it the safe experience? So I think you're going to start to see more of that as you see reorganizations take place, both in the governmental and municipal space, as well as in the private sector, that HR is going to have a louder voice in those conversations around what we're building and designing and putting in. It's interesting and it's good. It's good for people.
Very good point. Dwayne, anything to add before we go to the next question?
No, I touched on it as well. I mean, I do think, I do think this would scale back some of that office space, use some of the cost savings associated with that, keep some of it to bolster up your security posture. Now that I do work for cybersecurity, do that, bolster that up. But then, and maybe give some back to the employees to buy that, help them out with everybody gets $1,000 a year for a stand-up desk or whatever they sort of need.
Shuffling money around essentially from the benefit on one end to the other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Comes back to Evan's comments about well-being, right? It's not just the mental well-being, but even physical, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's next for us?
The next question is something that I will answer from a planning perspective. Some of the customer were saying here in the Q&A about the difficulty of acquiring the technology during the pandemic. And this is something that we had a session specifically in our booth on this yesterday is the whole supply chain issue. So work with your Microserve employee, account manager to find the right technology relative to ETAs. It is very difficult to get the technology. Poly has very good availabilities in the marketplace right now. So work with your account manager at Microserve to define what are the best technology to accelerate your deployments. The next one is, the customer here implemented remote work. We struggled with safety check-ins. Working alone has to report on a recurring basis. In a previous organization, employees also requested reimbursement for some costs. Finally, I think part of time work from home is more predominant scenario, and hoteling or sharing workspaces is a challenge as well. So I think this goes to the topic that you guys covered already, and maybe we can have a couple topics, is this hybrid work environment between hoteling, working from home, and sharing workspaces. Anything to add on this, gentlemen?
I'll add the part about the fact that the world is changing, and the job that we all have is going to technically be called adulting. We all knew we were part of this conference today. You know, we knew what time we needed to be somewhere and that we needed to be there. We didn't need a supervisor telling us to be there then. When we're visiting a client, when we have an RFP due, when we're typing a document, if you're hiring the right people and you're trusting them to do their job and you're measuring not their hours, but their output. Are they meeting their objectives? Are they, whatever those objectives are, monetarily, quantitatively, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Then do you really care if they're doing it at midnight or from their bedroom or wherever? Again, as long as they're available and they communicate and they work as part of a team and they're meeting their objectives, that's going to kind of be part of the new world that we're in. So yeah, if you've got somebody that you can't trust on your team because when you don't look at them, they're goofing off, I would say to you, that's not a technology problem. I would say you've hired the wrong person on your team.
Right.
I will add.
Yeah, go ahead, Dwayne.
Sorry, I was going to say, I'll add one component, and I think it was David that touched on it earlier. Just in and around the supervisors and stuff, and it's kind of aligned, but not 100%. What we do miss when we're, at home, working from home, is those sort of water cooler conversations and stuff that take place, right? And those conversations go a long ways for building the relationships that you do need within the workforce. And, companies need to think of different ways to build those relationships, and those relationships are fundamental to have the trust that, inevitably, you're going to have some conflict within work, right? But if you have a good foundation on the relationship side, you can handle that. But there's a whole component that is different now when you're working from home. We're not chatting around the coffee pot anymore.
Totally agreed.
That's part of that learning that I mentioned, of the things that we learned during the pandemic. We learned that top-down management is awesome using these technology tools. That, a managing director or a CEO can come on and talk to 1,000 people and tell them what their job is and they get it. But the peer-to-peer conversation doesn't happen organically. You actually have to have a supervisor foster it. Let's have a coffee chat every, no business talk. Show me pictures of your dogs or your family on the weekends. You have to have somebody actually draw that out, like the dentist. So a lot of things that we learned during the pandemic, and we can certainly go over that offline if anybody's interested in it.
Yeah, and the last question I think that we'll have time to cover is really specific to the municipality environment. What do you see as a realistic future for small municipalities of hybrid council meetings? Council in the physical room, but delegates attending and presenting remotely.
Yeah, and what, we're doing this already with some municipalities, and from a Teams perspective, if we're using Microsoft Teams, and I use it every day, we can have a fully collaborative meeting with people from anywhere, as long as they're connected. And so the Teams meeting itself is a fully collaborative experience. But let's say you wanted to have a council meeting where you wanted citizens to attend, but not necessarily collaborate with council. Well, live events can address that, where it's more of a consumption. The attendees are consuming information. Yes, they can still ask Q&A similar to what's happening here, but that can scale to actually 100,000 participants at this point in time with assistance from Microsoft. And then finally, if you really want to build a customized experience, Microsoft Teams with a product called Azure Communication Service to allow very specific customization and a world of flexibility. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. And that's why, again, I will defer back to Microserve to help you understand what's best for your business and your business pains and your business objectives.
It's all about the design.
The objectives are really important. We helped, I won't name names because I didn't ask, but certain courts entity downtown rapid deploy teams. And literally we did it from no Azure Active Directory, no M365. In less than 40 days, we had chat and meetings deployed and live, got our first rooms deployed, right? So it is absolutely possible if you want to be aggressive about it. That was our mandate. Yeah, okay, change management's got to come later. The teams rooms, some of the technology has to follow it, right? But you can rapidly adopt. It's just, I think what are the business goals you need to achieve? What does that experience need to be? If you know what that is, then there are solutions there to recreate that.
Yep.
And Dwayne, in 30 seconds or less.
I was going to say, I live in a municipality of 3,500 people. It's a pretty small municipality, and they've adopted this. All right, cool. And I was sharing my experience with the legislative assembly and stuff as well. Like we went down this path in the middle of the pandemic, so 100% it is doable.
Awesome. So I'd like to thank our panelists here today. I really appreciate you, Nigel, coordinating and facilitating this conversation. Evan from Microsoft, a big thank you for participating with us today. David from Poly, thank you very much from remote out there. And Dwayne, thank you so much for your engagement as one of our customer here. Really appreciate you participating. We at the top of our conversation, we had 89 participants. We all going to receive a survey request feedback form via the chat, and we're going to draw what Nigel was using in the last hour, a Studio Poly P15, and our marketing team is going to take care of that feedback. Again, thank you very much for all of your time today, and looking forward for a very successful end of MISA this week.
Yes, thanks very much, everybody. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.